Welcome to Pacific Northwest Worm Farming. We're here trying to turn your waste into our black gold. Right now, what we do is we compost things like cardboard, office paper, mail, and we mix it with things like coffee, dead leaves, shredded tree remains, a lot of food waste, and then after about 90 days of going through our composting systems, we tend to turn around and take all of that compost and we mix it in with paper, shredded cardboard, and we feed that to worms. What we're trying to achieve here is a breakdown of natural organic materials to supply local area farms, gardeners, anyone who really wants to improve their soil quality. We're going to supply those people with worms, vermicast, anything we have on hand that we make here. 100% organic, nothing artificial going in. As you'll see, we have currently 7 big tubs of 3 different species of worms. We're raising 6 total bins of red wigglers currently, 2 bins of European Nightcrawlers, and 2 55-gallon tubs of Louisiana swamp worms. Now, what does that really mean? Well, not a whole lot. These worms are just pretty much eating away at what food remains I've collected and the compost that I've made. Nothing special about it, but for the native soil in the area, it is going to turn things around tremendously. Just in under 2 months of just adding a little bit of this vermicast to a couple of potted plants in the house, I've had these same 2 aloe vera plants for almost 4 years now, and after 2 months of just a little bit of these worm castings, one of them already has 2 baby aloe veras budding on the sides. I'll show a little bit more pictures. If you really want to see what we've been doing from start to now, check out the Instagram. It's PNW_worm_farming. Check us out. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a tour of all of our current worm bins. I'm going to apologize first because this is, kind of a startup from my garage setup, so definitely got to apologize for the mess, and unfortunately I've been battling a small swarm of flies. So that being said, I've got some nasty fruit fly problems. They're starting to finally come under control. I didn't want to resort to using it, but I had to put diatomaceous earth on a couple of my totes because these guys are getting out of control. But now I'll go ahead and flip it around and give you a quick tour of what we are doing. So right here I kind of have all of the red wigglers. This is our reclaim bin. Anything that I've been getting from reclaims and sifting, I've been putting in here. I know it says Big Pig, but that was my first kind of experimental process. Over here, I have the other 2 red wiggler bins. As you can see, that lid's labeled, that one's on backwards. But then I also have these. Now, it's kind of hard to tell, but yes, there are actually worms living under this. Same goes for this. These are all of our red wigglers. Yeah, you can see the flies have gotten a little out of control. They kind of took off when I messed up with a mistake of leaving coffee on top. But as you can see, all of these bins have now dried out. and are actually starting to give me some good worms. I'll pull out these two bins and do a couple of quick shots on the inside. These are the European Nightcrawlers. They are a very, I would say, foresty kind of bin. We have a lot more wood, pine needles, that kind of stuff in there. So I've also seen a lot of great fungus coming out of there. I'm hoping to use that to kind of promote healthy bushes such as like blueberries, anything like that is really going to love the more fungus kind of stuff that I'm growing in that. And then over here in the more shoved away corner are the two Louisiana swampworm bins. As you can see, they are double the size of any of the bins. I will be pulling those down a little bit later to take a couple of shots inside and let you see some of those worms. Okay, so these are the European Nightcrawler bins. They are my most stable bin out of everything. I kind of like the design. Perfect amount of holes, good sizing. As you can see, I have hot glue gunned all four of these holes, but also down here on the side, I have two pretty good sized sets of three, and on the other side. Now, before I really dig into this bin right here, I'm just going to go ahead and spin it around. These are my first set of bait worms. I have the Louisiana swamp worms. They will be my other. I will probably slowly start to sell these by the pound, but not until I have a little bit more inventory. These ones have really just started breeding well, so I want to make sure I give them a good run of getting the next set of adults going, because I'm going to harvest these at the end of March or the beginning of April, maybe, right about there. And then all of these worms will be returned back into their bin, just not as much. I'm going to separate out a couple slabs, and then we will set them up with concrete mixing tubs as well. And that way I can start having them reproduce with what all worms need, a good surface area. Now, with that surface area, to keep the worm population, stable, you're going to need, obviously, their bedding, or, in my case, I use a compost, and then I take that compost and I mix it with a bin of shredded paper, just kind of like this guy right here. Unfortunately, I can't open it, but yeah. I will take all of that, get them situated. Once the worms settle down, I tend to go a couple of times a month and feed them. Just really depends on the population. I just gave these guys some fresh coffee yesterday. They were looking a little squirmy, and I found a lot breeding up on the edges when I opened them up. Now, the bin was a little wet, so I added a bunch of dry leaves and a little bit of diatomaceous earth to try and get this fly population a little bit better handled, and seems to have a positive effect so far. Before, it felt like you were breathing flies in here some days. And so I'll get you set up on the tripod, and I'll glove up and give you a view of what this worm bin looks like and what you can expect if you were to order a tub of European Nightcrawlers versus some of the mixes that people sell. During the video, I'll also kind of go over some of the finer points, like, do's and don'ts, things that you can do, and all depends on what you're comfortable with and your level of skill. The more you do it, the more you learn. Obviously, from there, it just carries on. Okay, let's get you set up. Okay, and welcome back. So here we go. Opening up the lid. So it does not appear that we have any worms on the lid. Always got to give a good check. Because some of these guys, such as that little guy right there, they love to crawl up here. And as you can see, he is quite active looking for a place to hide from the light. But so this is kind of my whole bin setup, you know, nothing special, nothing fun. As you can see, my lines here have kind of dropped excessively. Just yesterday I put a nice little heap of coffee right here, and I want to know who has been eating it. You can see that there is some activity right here at the surface. Oh, I missed him. Must have went a little deeper. But let's see what's going on here with the coffee. Oh, look at that. Some pretty nice broken up coffee. Looks like it did dry out pretty decently. So, no one in the coffee yet, but as you can see, if you can see, if I take and move back corners, and I know that there's a little bit more of an active corner and a little bit less active corner. And it looks like these guys have been doing a really good job. You can see how broken down this stuff really is. A couple of little babies in there. But what I'm looking for is one of those adult. Like this fella. Now this is your classic European Nightcrawler. Pretty big, somewhat active. You can kind of see right here as they clean a little bit off of him or her, depending on what you want to view these creatures as. They are asexual. They can reproduce with themselves. As you can see, this little fella is quite strong and moving where he wants to go. Now, this being one of the more adult sizes, I'll go ahead and put it back and show you, if it doesn't run from me, kind of a juvenile, almost adult stage. You can see these guys are much bigger than the regular European, or than the red wigglers, excuse me. Quite a difference. This is about the size of a regular adult red wiggler. Here we go. Just so you kind of have a more idea. Notice this stuff kind of starting to be broken down, you know, but it has more of a forest smell. You can see a lot of more pine needles. This stuff was made with more woody area kind of mulch. What we do is we have a couple of mulchers. We mulch our own leaves. We break down all of the little sticks. My first batches of compost actually mainly consisted of broken down rhododendron bush that I processed for several weeks before I actually made it in. And that's where some of my first experimental things came in. But this is kind of what a worm bin should look like. You know, not too wet, not too dry. I keep my moisture very much in check. See here. Looks like this guy right here. Maybe a week or two old at most. Matter of fact, here we go. Now, this right here, this is almost baby. Probably just hatched. You know, barely moving along, but cruising up here probably came off one of the adults I pulled off with the lid. Let's see. Hello. These big adults that I find in here are probably some of the first starters. I started both this one. So this bin and the bin below, I started both at the same time. They were made from the same mixture of material, came from the same compost bin. They both started with a ½ pound of European Nightcrawlers. Later on, we'll get into the Louisiana Nightcrawlers, or the Louisiana swamp worms, and you'll see they're very similar, a little bit smaller, and a lot more active. Maybe not active in this fashion, but definitely in breeding. The last time I was in their bin, it seemed like their population had almost doubled, and it is, you know, a good fresh start into winter here. So everything is a lot colder. That's why I run the heater in here. Just the one in the garage. Nothing special. I keep the lights on. It helps attract all the flies out of the bins. And then I can put them, you know, into their own kind of dirty nastiness that I kind of like to pile up and I dump back in. It gives a good fresh look on what these worms eat. So when they're not processing the compost, I like to give them some nice snacks. You know, ignore the weight. This is just a bag that I've been reusing, but it contains a lot of crushed eggshell, peppers, banana, onion. Yes, I feed my worms onions, peppers. They love them. I also feed them a lot of coffee. That's what I make all of my compost out of now. I do not have a reliable source on manures yet. So I only got some samples from a farmer friend that I knew. So everything that I'm doing is now what I like to call vegan compost. It will either be a heavy bacterial or a heavy fungus compost. I like to drive to different types of compost for specializing in helping different plants, you know, trees, shrubs, you know, things like that. They love a much more fungus-driven soil enhancer. That's where this stuff comes in. That's why these guys will probably hang out in here for another couple of months, breaking this stuff down. They're doing an amazing job for, you know, being pretty much traumatized and brought in here. They came all the way from South Carolina over here. Looks like I got a pine cone situation here, but you can see this stuff is really nice and fluffy. Right behind me here, this is a finished bin of stuff. I'm just trying to kind of bait the worms out. I haven't perfected getting all of the worms out yet, but a couple of contacts and friends have given me some great ideas and some good help to kind of baiting these worms out of the finished casting products. And that's one of the things that makes my castings a lot more unique compared to other people's, is I control my moisture content more than anyone else. You know, I'm starting to dig down real deep in here, finding some of the big, juicy adults squirming around. This little juvenile here, but you can see their breakups here in the corner where I like to feed in the beginning to start out with these worms. You know, look at this. I'm just dumping big worms now straight on out. Some nice, healthy, active looking worms. If you kind of look down in here, I'll give you a little bit better view. If I can not knock the tripod over, but yeah, you can see definitely have a good healthy supply, especially over there in the corner, of worms just kind of going to town here. Now these guys haven't been fed in a little while. I just gave them a little bit of coffee yesterday and it was pretty dry, so I'm going to go ahead and give them a little bit of freezer food. So I don't let my stuff defrost all the way. It's part of my secret into getting more water out of your broken down food. All of this stuff just soaked in water. So I will kind of pack this banana peel in the corner, give it kind of like a slushy right over here, and then I'll come back in probably about a month and I'll dig this corner out, mix the whole thing up, and I'll put another bunch of food in there. Now along with that banana peel, got some nice bell pepper chunks in here. Probably give them one of those. A little bit of this onion skin to break down. And a nice big old frozen carrot. Now you're probably saying, oh, that's not a whole lot, but then I'm going to sit here and I'm going to put a pumpkin top right on top. Good amount of food. You're probably saying, oh, Brandon, that's not a whole lot of food. You put a half pound of worms in there 2 months ago. Almost 3 months ago now. Well, that half pound probably has come close to doubling, but this stuff will take a little while. The peppers and the banana peel will break down a lot slower. The pumpkin's been frozen for a while, so it'll give us a lot of moisture. And I will take, to help soak up that moisture, over here in my hidden corner, I have coffee. And I will just go ahead and throw this coffee right on top. You can see my coffee is all dried out. I used to go to a coffee stand and pick up a couple buckets. And what I like to do is let it sit in these buckets and dry out. So now I have a nice coffee crumble in this corner. I'm going to go ahead and start kind of covering it back up. My corner's covered. Now I want to make sure to cut off the little critters, such as these fruit flies that I'm having so much fun with. I keep a nice healthy covering of leaves on it. These shredded leaves are lovely for keeping pests at bay. They break down. One thing I will recommend though, once you start really having these break down, go ahead and get yourself a mask. Not like, you know, anything fancy. You can get a nice dust mask like this one. 20 bucks. It's not the best kind, but it will really save you on allergies. These leaves create a leaf mold very, very potent, and it will make your sinuses burn. And if you have any other kind of allergies, it's going to really, really make your sinuses burn and probably go haywire. I'm a lot more tolerant to these kind of things, so I handle it pretty well. But that's the first European Nightcrawler bin. I will go ahead and flip the next one up, and we will take a look, see what those guys have been doing, and then I will start bringing down some red wigglers. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, and here we are at bin number 2. A little bit more dried out, but definitely some increased surface activity. Not only... Oh. Well, he doesn't want to come see you. Definitely not a YouTube star. Not only do I see this nice-sized juvenile crawling across the side here, but right here I got a nice little baby. A couple more juveniles and an adult running down here. Does not appear too much, but I bet you if I pull back over here for this feeding, we'll find that these guys have a lot more hiding in this corner. Now, if you notice, I try and take the leaf litter off and pile it up, because this stuff is what really helps protect against these flies. And what I do is I spray them, and then I put diatomaceous earth on it, and you know, it looks like there's a lot of flies. Maybe you see a couple flying around the camera lens. I'm not sure what you're seeing, but I definitely can see that, you know, here's a nice old chunk of pine cone, and I just saw a couple of them crawling on. And the more I pull off this surface, I start seeing a couple more, you know, here and there, and more flying out of this bin. I don't know exactly what you guys can see, but, you know, this is the second kind of pine style bin. This one's a little bit less processed. Looks like these guys are definitely enjoying the better life. Piece of wood there. Oh, yeah, there we go. A couple of juicy adults right here. And right here. A couple of good sized ones. Having themselves a good old time up here at the surface. I think I'm going to go ahead and feed. It looks like got some coffee that's kind of balled up. And really see these guys are very active. You know, I'm not sure I keep the thermometer in my room next to my bed so I can see, because that's just right on the other side of the wall behind where you're looking from. And, you know, usually in here it's probably around 65 to, you know, 70 being the warm temperature on some of the 40, 45 degree days. But when it drops down to the, you know, 30s, and I guess we're supposed to get some 20s later on this week, but I'll turn it up to high, and it'll probably stay a good 65 in here. But I can pull my temperature probe out, you know, it's reading kind of cold, and I can already tell just by sticking my hand in here that the soil, the stuff they're swimming through, definitely a lot warmer than what the air temperature is. You can see just by sitting in my hand, both of these two worms have really livened up. Even more so than when I first grabbed them. Let's see what the end result is there. I'll try and work around the temperature probe. And I thought I'd give you guys a little bit better view on the second bin than I did on the first. Unfortunately, corners and camera setups, you know, the garage is kind of small. The structure here that I have all the wood and everything on is a pallet rack that's 12 feet long by 4 feet wide. So, you know, it's taken up a good third of my garage already. You know, yeah, we keep a lot of our personal stuff on it, but I was able to talk to my wife, and we were able to sort everything out so this could end up being the worm farm that we want it to be. Now I like to go through and see how these guys are doing. You know, we have pine cones in here. When they sift, they'll come out and go through a couple more batches, but I gotta always watch my water. As you can see, we're already almost up to 70. Definitely want to look for any strange looking things. Like I just found a very small worm. At first it was kind of pinkish whitish looking, and I thought possibly it could be a potworm, but none. Been lucky enough to stay away from those. You can see the more I dig down, the more the flies kind of swarm, because this is their food domain, if you will. So the flies are all starting to come over here to look for what they think is their grubby little fun stuff. I always like to dig down to the bottom though to make sure that, one, my moisture is still good. Two, I like to break up the adult worm parties. As you can see, that's a nice fat one. No, I'm not really trying to break up the parties. I'm actually just trying to break up the corner pockets. I put food in corner pockets. Sometimes I'll do center feed pockets. If I know I'm getting close to the end, keep everything right on top. It's easy to scoop out of. I thought that would be a good way to actually bait worms out. And I'll show you a little bit about that. And I'll give you a little bit more information. But right now, looking a little bit colder than I'd like, but it's still 68 in there, you know. I put some more coffee in here with a little bit of this stuff. It'll definitely warm it right back up. I've noticed that my coffee does a great job of warming the soil, but it does not overheat because I give them small amounts with other nitrogen byproducts around them. So, this bin is a little bit more juicy. So we'll break out some eggshell. See if we can get some of these noodles, zucchini noodles. Unfortunately, you can see they started to go bad very quickly. But these things have a ton of water content. You can see I'm kind of breaking up the ice slurry on there. So it's not too cold, but we'll definitely soak that up with some coffee. A little bit of pumpkin. Let's see what other fun goodies are down here in the bottom of the bag. Got some what I like to call bag leavings. Frozen blueberries. A little bit of frozen mushrooms, it looks like, a piece of bell pepper, a little bit more eggshell. I want to get some more grit in this bin. This bin didn't get as much. I ran out of eggshell, so I decided to grab some from the frozen bag to get going. Give them a little bit of pepper and onion leavings. There's some more pumpkin. And jalapeno pepper tops. They seem to really go after those pepper tops. I don't know why they say that they won't, but I have never had a problem. All of my food disappears. I check on the food pockets, but it's been about a month with these guys before I get food really going and gone. I always make sure that when I do feed this food, it's going to be gone completely before I feed them more. Yeah, good 68 degrees in here at the bottom. And it's going to get warmer because I have to turn the heater up tonight for some low temperatures going on. part of my process to make things smoother and faster was shredding all of my own material and getting this coffee grounds to dry out so they can absorb excess moisture from the food that I feed them. And they mix well with this topsoil mixture from the compost. Gives it a nice good afterburn. My compost is already finished, but some of this pine needles have not broken down all the way. I only run it for 90 days, and I'll take you out and I'll show you both my compost bins. I only have a little 43 gallon and a big 80 gallon. But yeah, these are the European Nightcrawlers. Yeah, I was watching this guy crawl through the soil. Kind of break it up and push it over there. See what happened over here. This is the little bit of coffee. Much warmer right here. A little bit dry, but I really like the warmth that it's getting. I put this coffee on top and then I cover it with some soil when I do the center. I don't worry about that. That will always disappear. These worms are quite an amazing thing. They definitely are a perfect evolved creature. I've seen and read a couple of stories about people that raise these, and they look like potworms. They raise them in a heavy grit environment. The worms actually shrink down in size, and if you were to pull them out of that heavy grit environment and put them into something like this, they turn within several weeks back into this size. Quite amazing creatures. Well, that's all for the European Nightcrawlers. I'm going to go ahead and cover this back up for you, and then we will get started on the red wigglers. I won't be showing the concrete bins today. They are just getting started. I want to make sure they don't get any bothersome. But the three big tubs of red wigglers will definitely get some involvement. We'll take a look, see what the reclaim bin's been doing, and see how things are looking.